Everybody knows to add Tyrone Tracy Jr. this week. Everyone saw Cam Scadaboo's ankle turn, and all the waiver wire videos are going to tell you to add Tyrone Tracy, who is already owned in every serious fantasy football league. Let's be real. Tyrone Tracy's not available in any of your leagues. Now, if he is, obviously you want to pick him up. Look how good he was last year. 3 100-yard rushing games. Scadaboo out for the rest of the year with a dislocated ankle. Tyrone Tracy played for the rest of the game. After that, Devin Singletary barely contributed. Singletary, in fact, might even get traded by the New York Giants at the deadline. They might call up Dante Miller to be the running back too. So you definitely want to add Tyrone Tracy. But that is not who we are here to talk about today, because you guys are serious fantasy football players, and I'm here to seriously help you out. Dylan Samson is the sneakiest running back out of the week. I don't think in your league mates are smart enough to add him this week, because Quinshon Judkins is day-to-day with his AC joint sprain in his shoulder. But Dylan Samson is the real running back, too, for the Cleveland Browns. He had a 54 utilization rate, 46% of the snaps, 23% of the rush attempts, and 44% of the routes. What you can see from his game logs is he is definitely the running back 3 when Judkins is active. They prefer to use Jerome Ford as the long down and distance and 2-minute drill back. No more than 20% of the 2-minute drill for Judkins or for Dylan Samson in a game. However, when Judkins goes out, Samson then gets elevated and plays a larger role than Jerome Ford does. It's your classic running back 3 becomes the running back 1, running back 2 stays in the same role. Dylan Samson was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year in 2024 in college. I actually was not a huge fan of Dylan Samson as a prospect. I thought maybe he was a little bit too small. You know, a lot of those Tennessee Volunteers stats are very fake once they get to the NFL. But Samson, for about 5 to 10% of your budget this week. First off, he might get a start because Kevin Stefanski might be lying about Quinshon Judkins' shoulder, but he is the exact kind of guy that ends up coming out of nowhere and is a fantasy football hero in the playoffs. Next up, we need to talk about one Mr. Belle Tutin, a running back. What you guys are seeing is the post-buy stuff for Bucky Irving last year. Bucky Irving, of course, was drafted and coached by Liam Cohen in 2024. Belle Tutin was drafted and coached by Liam Cohen in 2025. The week 11 bye week, right after that, we see Bucky Irving scale up to 52% of the snaps. We see Bucky Irving then go 25 for 152 and 1 against Carolina. Then he just absolutely smashes for the rest of the season. Now, do I think that Belle Tutin is as good as Bucky Irving? I mean, honestly, maybe if you put me on truth serum, I would say yes. But Travis Etienne Jr. just had his 2 least efficient games of the season in week 6 and week 7 before the Jacksonville Jaguars traveled back from London, had their week 8 bye. I expect Belle Tutin to get at least 10 touches this week against the Las Vegas Raiders. And by then, it will be too late. So make sure that you are preemptively adding Belle Tutin this week. Next up at the running back position, we have Tank Bsby. This is another one where the coaches could pretty clearly be lying to us. Bsby is now the clear running back 2 for the Philadelphia Eagles. They have relegated A.J. Dillon to a healthy scratch in their most recent 2 games. And more importantly, we were drafting Will Shipley like he was the Eagles' handcuff running back. Now, obviously, we did not know that they were going to trade for Tank Bsby as a, quote, kick returner. But Shipley has only played in long down and distance and 2-minute drill. I would basically say Will Shipley is our generation's Kenneth Gainwell for the Philadelphia Eagles. Shipley, after Saquon left the game last week against the Giants, only played on long down and distance. Tank Bsby played on 13 of the next 16 snaps for the Philadelphia Eagles. We can see, even without the Barkley injury, 18% of the team rush attempts for Bsby, 10% for Will Shipley. Now, you might get to start Bsby this week, but more importantly, running back 2 for the Philadelphia Eagles, insanely valuable. Just a team that is so dedicated to running the ball, a team that has a great run blocking offensive line when all those guys are healthy. So I'm pretty hip to adding Tank Bsby this week. I think you can spend between 8 and 10% of your waiver budget on Mr. Bsby. Christian Watson came back. Christian Watson returned from his week 18 ACL tear before Brandon Ayuk. By the way, I would check your waivers for Brandon Ayuk if you have a really good team. He's probably not going to be back until about week 12, but he could be a difference-making ad for the fantasy football playoffs. Watson was awesome. We do actually forget that Christian Watson in 2024 had 150 against the Bears, 114 against Detroit, 3 for 68 and 1 against Arizona. Now, the Packers offense was a bit muddled and messy. But what I thought was so interesting about Christian Watson's return to the Packers was that he ran the third most routes on the team. He ran 24 routes. Matthew Golden ran 28. Now, Dontavian Wicks did miss that game. And Wicks, we make such a meme out of Dontavian Wicks, but Wicks is going to impact Golden and Watson's routes a little bit, but Christian Watson, when he's active, when he's healthy, can be a super difference-making fantasy player. I mean, how bad are some of the wide receivers you've started this year? Go look at some of your fantasy football teams and tell me some of the horrible, horrible wide receivers that you have added in fantasy football this year or started, right? I mean, look, Darnell Mooney last week was like manna from heaven before he got 2 fantasy points. I mean, we are about to talk about the third wide receiver this year for the Tennessee Titans on waivers. I mean, it's really bad. So Christian Watson's ceiling, if he is able to get to about 80% of the routes, which feels negligible, I think it'll probably scale up. I think it'll take a couple weeks for him to get there, but it's pretty clear that Watson does still kind of have that difference-making long speed, even coming back from the injury. So he is my top ad on teams that are already good. So if you have a good fantasy team, if you are, 6-2, 5-3, you think you're going to make the playoffs, I would definitely want to add Christian Watson. Next up, we have Shamir DK, who saw 8 targets last week after 4 targets the week before, scored a receiving touchdown. He's also an awesome kick returner. That's actually what he was drafted for. He was a 4th-round pick out of the University of Florida, and most people thought they basically just drafted him to be a special teamer guy and drafted Io Manor to be a good boundary wide receiver. Calvin Ridley is an injured hamstring. Tyler Lockett asked to be released. The Tennessee Titans basically start every game down 14 points, so their pass rate is just going to be absurd. Like Cam Ward's dropbacks per game is so much higher than the Tennessee Titans coaching staff wants it to be, basically because they're just a terrible team. They're just every game, it's like, okay, we're going to have one bad turnover. The defense is going to get walked over. And all of a sudden, we are going to throw the ball 42 times. Obviously, do not go crazy on Shamir DK. The Tennessee Titans are 32 out of 32 in available fantasy points. I ran this analysis last week, basically just did a simple addition of how many available fantasy points are there for each team. And it's way higher for the Dallas Cowboys are number 1, by the way, but the Tennessee Titans are in a league of their own, 32 of 32. But if you do need a wide receiver for the next couple weeks, I do think you can probably spend, if you have $100 budget, about $5 or so. Next up, we have to talk about the Houston Texans, guys. Christian Kirk might be back this week. Sounds like Nico Collins will almost certainly be back against Denver this week. Jalen Knoll led the team in receiving last week. Xavier Hutchinson scored a touchdown. Jaden Higgins scored a touchdown. In week 7 and 8, Hutchinson has run 78% of the routes. Higgins has run 70. Knoll only 47, but you might notice leads them in targets per route run, leads them in target share because Jalen Knoll is just really good. I mean, Jalen Knoll is just a very good football player at getting open. I'm actually more concerned about Higgins. Again, on good fantasy teams, I want Jalen Knoll. He in like week 15, this dude is going to be projecting for like 12.5 fantasy points per game. Jalen Knoll is like, what if Christian Kirk was good and not injured, which is like a pretty attractive guy to add to your rosters in fantasy football. Higgins, I am a little bit more concerned about because I have larger concerns about how good he might be. The fact that Xavier Hutchinson has the same target share and roughly the same targets per route run in games that Nico Collins has been out is concerning to me. Very funny, by the way, that Higgins, Hutchinson, and Knoll all went to Iowa State University. Jaden Higgins actually replaced Xavier Hutchinson's X position at Iowa State. It doesn't really mean anything, but it is just very funny. Now, we definitely need Jared Wayne's routes to go to 0 to feel good about Jalen Knoll. And frankly, watching that game against the 49ers, I was like, man, am I making this up or does Braxton Berrios look kind of good? Stroud obviously has finally been playing good football, finally has positive EPA numbers over the most recent 3 weeks, so he's finding a little bit of something. But for good fantasy teams, I definitely want to add a little bit of Knoll. Now, if Christian Kirk comes back, that's very bad for Jalen Knoll because they will play Kirk over Knoll to some degree. I mean, look, even with all these guys out, the dude's only running 47% of the routes. Higgins is a better start in week 9 against Denver. No Patrick Surtain for Denver, and he's more likely to just stay in his role that was abdicated by Justin Watson's injury. But I do like adding both of those fellas. And obviously, again, you guys play in serious fantasy football leagues, but Troy Franklin Awesome game against Dallas, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns. He is up to a really nice route share. He's played 64% of Denver snaps this year. Funny that he got all the way up to 82% in their come from behind victory. So I think that does show you, by the way, Sean Payton is at least pretending to be serious, because when his team needed points, who did he go to? One of his actually good players. Marvin Mims suffered a concussion against Dallas as well, and only had 1 target in the passing game. Like, what they've done is they've scaled up Pat Bryant and scaled Marvin Mims down. Now, Pat Bryant, I can toss him in here as like a 1 to 2% guy as well, but he's basically the Lil Jordan Humphrey, Brandon Johnson run blocking wide receiver in this offense. So sure, he might score 4 touchdowns the rest of the way, but you are going to have an impossible time trying to get him there. Tight end is a bit of a mess. I hammered you guys to add Colston Lovell last week, so I hope that this is redundant for you guys. But he ran 78% of the routes, 15% of the team's targets, 16% targets per route run. Cole Kmet might come back this week, but also Luther Burden has a concussion, and Olamide Zaccheaus is listed as day-to-day with a knee injury. So against the Cincinnati Bengals, what we could see is we could basically just see Colston Loveland end up playing the slot wide receiver, ton of 12 personnel. If Dylan Samson is the top sneaky ad this week, I would definitely try and add Loveland off waivers or try and trade for Loveland, because I think down the stretch, we're going to see Cole Kmet's role diminish. We're definitely going to see Zaccheaus' role diminish. Although if Zaccheaus starts this week with Luther Burden out, he is like a good, like, get me over $1 waiver streamer. And then I feel like we've talked about him a bunch, but Theo Johnson just has like an insane route share. The New York Giants have absolutely no wide receivers. They're relying on Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton this week. It's not a great matchup against San Francisco, but he's out there all the time, scores some touchdowns, decent PFF stuff. I mean, 23 receptions, 212 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's played the 4th most passing snaps of any tight end in the NFL. He's kind of the definition of a guy who is out there. So make sure that you were adding Dylan Samson this week. Make sure that you are doing a quick check. Just make sure Tyrone Tracy is not out there. If you need wide receiver ceiling, add Christian Watson or add Jalen Noel. If you need some wide receiver points, you're just desperate this week, Olamide Zaccheaus and Jaden Higgins. Theo Johnson is your streaming tight end. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you are subscribed for daily fantasy football videos here on the Davis Mattek channel. Comment down below any of your waiver questions. I'll be happy to answer them, and I will see you guys back tomorrow.